I'm Linda Hirsch.
I'm Jim Carney, and this is EdCast, a program created and produced by educators for everyone interested in education.
Today, I speak with Phil Weinberg, DOE Deputy Chancellor for Teaching and Learning. Mr. Weinberg's broad responsibilities include curriculum and instruction, college readiness, EdTech, and professional development. We'll discuss what he sees as the DOE's priorities and what the DOE is doing to improve instruction and student success.
Later on in the program, we'll pay a visit to an education fair showcasing one of the Chancellery's new teaching and learning projects, the Learning Partners Program. But we begin with Linda's conversation with the Deputy Chancellor.
My guest today is Phil Weinberg, New York City Deputy Chancellor for Teaching and Learning. A former teacher and principal, Mr. Weinberg's responsibilities include professional development and curriculum, accountability, the Common Core, and college readiness, as well as technical education and instructional support. Thank you so much for joining us today on EdCast.
It's a pleasure to be here.
You have an extensive portfolio. Yes. So I'm assuming what are your priorities? If we looked at your to-do list, what does it say?
It boils down to two major things. We'd like students to be able to think well for themselves, be independent learners, be able to think clearly, critically, well, and individually. We don't see the end of their instruction as being answering questions for an exam. We see them as being productive members of society who can form ideas on their own. And we think that in order to do that, we know that in order to do that, schools need to be authentic learning organizations. Educators need to be learners, schools need to be involved in experimenting with how their work works well, and we need to share with each other the best work that we do. We need to think about our professional learning in every aspect of our school day. We need to look at the fact that we have 1,650 schools under our purview as an opportunity to conduct 1,650 great experiments and learn from those experiments and share that learning with each other.
That's such a wonderful learning orientation, and I can't help but feel that our obsession with assessment and testing is kind of poisoning that atmosphere in some way. What do you think? Are we testing too much? Is assessment ruining a vision of education and what it really should be like?
I think that we're thinking about assessment incorrectly. I think there's too much emphasis on using assessment as a way of rating and ranking people, and much less focus on the power that assessment has to help us know what students know and do not know. Our job, every educator's job, is to assess students. And in fact, when we look deeply at our work, we assess students all the time. We don't assess students all the time in order to rate them every single minute of the day. We assess them so that we know where they are in their learning curve, and we assess them so that we know how to best help them learn more. We need to do the same thing with schools and with teachers. The assessment of the work that happens in schools has to be first and foremost driven by how can we help schools learn? How can we help teachers learn? Our system of teacher development and evaluation needs to emphasize development over evaluation. We have to be able to make sure our first job is to make sure teachers are well positioned to grow and become better instructors. We must assess who's not doing a good job. We have to. Our students are owed that, but it's not the first thing we need to do.
So as you mentioned, a lot of things here that kind of tie in together. So that first idea, of course, is that the assessment should be valuable. Now, I know some people complain that the results of the assessment come out the next year, and so the teachers really can't use it for the current group of students that they have. Are we making any inroads in getting the information back earlier to schools and teachers?
So New York City is doing some really interesting things. We have our own internal performance assessments, which can be used as benchmarks at the beginning of the year to guide teachers in their instruction, and can roll up to some of the end-year assessments. But it's a great way to take a look at the assessment, see student results, look at it as a community, and talk about what should we point our instruction toward this year given this group of students in front of us and the information we have about them.
So that would make it much more useful.
It would be a tool for learning.
Now, you've talked about professional development. You began to touch on it, which I think is a key point. And I guess it also dovetails with this whole idea of how teachers are evaluated themselves, and it seems to run in the face of good PD for teachers. So let's try to separate those things out. Right now, teachers are getting an awful lot of heat. And it's no surprise to anyone here that the governor has now proposed that the stakes should be even higher for teachers. And their assessment should be based, 50% on the grades that their students get on the tests. What do you think of that? And are teachers taking the heat unnecessarily? And what should we be doing to evaluate them?
I think the 50% proposal is a dangerous one because, as our chancellor said, the human touch in evaluation and development is essential.
Don't you think? I mean, it's so preposterously high.
I wouldn't presume to put my head inside the head
me.
But I do think that there's an opportunity here to engage in a more thoughtful discussion about what the ends of this should be. We want teachers to grow and improve. We certainly don't want teachers who don't want to work or who can't do the job, and the job is a hard one. It's not one that everyone can do, to continue to work. But we also think that an end-year exam that becomes a high-stake exam for a teacher becomes in fact a curricula, because that teacher knows that their job is dependent on it. We don't want testing companies to make our curricula. That's a bad idea. We don't want single sitting, one-shot exams to be what a teacher thinks about all year as they prepare students to learn.
And how can they not if they're being told that their entire assessment is based on that?
If 50% of my evaluation was dependent upon one day's test, I'd be hard-pressed not to have that in my mind as I planned every single day for 180 days. I don't want 180 lessons focused on that test.
I can see, and I know, as I said, you were a teacher and an AP and a principal, that you really have an educator's perspective on all of this. So when you think about the curriculum, and I know you're speaking as a true educator, and I really appreciate that, how do you think that teachers, it's not just their assessment, if they're teaching to the test, are you concerned that in the current climate we're pushing other subject areas out of the spotlight? People are saying social studies and civics are taking a backseat, the arts are taking a backseat. What's your take on someone who's looking at curriculum and instruction in the school?
I'm fearful that that will happen in the minds of teachers, that what the test looks like should be what their curricula is. I think that we need to enter an era where our assessments improve so that we feel comfortable that we are evaluating our students and our teachers on the things in which we believe. As they improve, it will be easier to have this conversation. Right now, a global exam that looks like 50 Trivial Pursuit questions is no way we want to assess anyone, students or teachers. And so it's a bad test for students and a bad way to tell whether we're doing a good work.
What would you like to see us do in terms of evaluating teachers? What would you tell the governor is a better idea?
I think that we need to do what New York City is doing. We need to make sure we're norming around what we think good instruction looks like. We need to tie our work to a common language, a common rubric that defines good instruction, that makes it available to everybody to know what we believe good instruction is, and then to make sure that we spend a lot of time in and out of classes, both administrators, but I think there's a hidden and untapped potential in having teachers in and out of each other's classes, looking at their work relative to the common language that we've established and talking to each other about what better looks like. Our best teachers can get better. Our first-year teachers have to get better, and we all need to take responsibility for that happening.
Now, would you see that then as part of your vision of professional development for teachers? And let's take a step back. What do you think good instruction looks like? When we're talking about, what does good instruction look like to you?
So good instruction looks like someone has prepared a lesson around who's going to come into their room today based on who they knew them to be yesterday and the month before. And they're going to have prepared a lesson that thinks about who they are today and where they could be at the end of the school year. And then what we see happening is young people starting to engage in processing ideas on their own because their teacher has created the conditions by which they can be the drivers of the work in that room.
So let's get our teachers then prepared to do that kind of teaching. I know we've had Elizabeth Green on the program, the author of Building a Better Teacher, and she talked about international models. What are some of the models or some of the approaches that you would like to see put in? I know you mentioned teachers collaborating and talking to each other. I'm seeing that as part of a bigger overall vision. So tell us a little bit about how you're viewing professional development, what the DOE is doing in terms of PD, and where you see it going.
So we want to make sure we think of professional development as professional learning. In fact, we call the office of Professional Learning.
We don't call it training anymore.
No, we don't call it training.
We don't call it training, right?
Right. And part of what is ideal for us is related to the 80 minutes of professional learning time that we built into this contract. We envision that time being used by faculty looking at student work together, examining what they see happening and deciding what's our path forward. Here's what we see, here's where we see our students are. What do we know that we can plan that will help them move forward well and quickly?
Now, one of the ideas, one of the pedagogical approaches that you've been using is using schools to help having faculty visit other schools. Can you tell us a little bit about that program? And then we're going to take a look actually at what that looks like. What is that called and what is it intended to do?
I love the Showcase Schools programs and the Learning Partners Schools programs. We want to be very intentional about having schools work with each other to share things that work. So we've created in the Learning Partners program triads of schools who have a year-long course of study together. One school has advertised something they do well, and 2 other schools join them in learning about how that results in better student learning. They spend a considerable amount of time in each other's schools, and they learn together.
So let's take a look at what Jim found out.
That's great.
On a recent cold winter afternoon, hundreds of teachers and administrators from dozens of schools across the 5 boroughs met at the Roosevelt Hotel in Manhattan to share their knowledge at a mid-year gathering. The purpose of the meeting was summed up by New York City Schools Chancellor Carmen Farina.
I have to say, I have a lot of ideas when I was offered this job, and this was one that I had been having for years. And it was more like a dream, because I really, really do believe that the best learning is teacher to teacher, principal to principal, and superintendent to superintendent. We can learn more from each other than we can learn from any book or any lecture. But to see it come to fruition and really, really work is more than a dream come true. And I have to say that of all the things we've done, Learning Partners is one of the things I'm proudest of.
The New York City Department of Education Learning Partners program is designed to promote inter-school collaborative learning by setting up triads of 3 schools, 1 as a host and 2 as learning partners. The host school identifies a strong learning focus area that it shares with its 2 partner schools.
I'm here because we are a part of the Learning Partners program. We are a host school. We've been participating since September, and it's been a wonderful experience to collaborate with 2 other schools. We collaborate with PS 9 and PS 159. We're focused on literacy and improving literacy instruction, and it's been a wonderful experience to collaborate with teams, not just with principals, which I've often done, but with teams of teachers and administrators from both schools who come together, share best practices.
Like if I go to every kindergarten class, would I see something very similar?
Learning focuses for the triads are chosen from 16 different areas based on recommendations of principals, teachers, and staff, and chosen from the previous year's work. Shared areas can range from supporting teacher growth to supporting English language learners, promoting community engagement, strategic planning for school resources, such as staff time, physical plant, and school budgets. Each triad is guided by a program facilitator from the Department of Education.
As a program facilitator, I bring the 3 schools in my triad together in order to really facilitate the learning the learning among the different schools. So one of the wonderful things about our program is that we have host schools that are able to really share some of the practices that they're using at their schools, and there are partner schools who are really interested in learning about those, but you also need somebody to kind of put those pieces together and make sure that the learning flows.
A critical element of the Learning Partners program is in the process itself. Teachers become better educators as they share their knowledge and techniques with teachers from their partner schools. Chancellor Farina summed it up this way.
You don't get better at something unless you have an audience. When you need to show off to someone else, when you need to explain what you're doing, it makes you a more thoughtful person. I remember one of my teachers, who was a very good teacher, but thought she had learned everything there was to learn. When she would get a struggling teacher from another school come in and say, well, yeah, but you have your kids, meaning, PS6 kind of kids, and then I have these kids, and that teacher having to struggle, my teacher, explaining how she would adapt what she was doing for someone else's students, that made her a better teacher. And it made her really struggle, the same way that I'm hoping many of you have to struggle to explain how do you do what you do with an English language learner? Or how do you do what you do with the special needs kids? We need to be able to see what we've done and just do it differently and better and better. So to me, seeing so many of you in this room is absolutely wonderful. So I don't want to keep you from sharing because obviously that's what you're here for, but I really want to thank you because when I am not feeling so comfortable about things, all I have to think about is learning partners, and I cheer up and I say, if I've done nothing else as Chancellor, this is good enough. So thank you very much.
At the Roosevelt Hotel in Midtown Manhattan, I'm Jim Carney for CUNY EdCast. Now, back to Linda and her guest in the studio.
What would you like us to take away from this?
There are a couple things that I think are exceptionally important here. One of the things we should recognize is we've made a consistent and concerted and effort to move away from a culture of competition to a culture of collaboration. This is collaboration in its most beautiful form. We have hundreds of educators in a room sharing with each other what's working, what their struggles are, and how to make sure that they together move our system in a positive way. The other thing that's interesting is the role of the Central Department of Education here is as a support, not as a mandate. We're there to help facilitate the kind of collaboration we know will move schools, but we know the locus of information, the locus of expertise is in the schools. We're there to help one school receive help from another school, not to tell schools how to do their work.
Very nice to also acknowledge that schools can learn from one another and that public schools are not just public charter schools, have things to share and to help each other become better at what they do. I think that's really important to recognize that.
I would extend it and say we have 1,650 schools who have a great deal to teach the world, and they're doing a wonderful job.
Now, in terms of the teachers getting together, we've had this really, I think this is a best practice in the international sense as well. We know that some of the best school systems in the world are using this model of greater collaboration, so I think it just looks to me like something really positive, and as a teacher I would love to be involved in something like that. But that brings us to the schools that are not working and the issues that are surrounding the schools that are struggling. What is the DOE doing in terms of the struggling schools? It's very consistent with what we want to do in our collaboration programs. We want to provide support. We want to make sure we're a learning organization. We need to meet each entity in our organization where they are and decide on a path that will move them forward. If that's a student, it sounds clear. If it's a school, we haven't worked in that way before. In fact, what we've done in the past is call out what's not working and make it harder for that school to work by identifying it as a poor performing school. Our job now is to go into schools and see what is it that will help that school serve its students better, and how can we facilitate that school moving in that direction. Do you think that the DOE can take care of that ourselves? We don't need to turn these schools over to the state. We don't have that we can do this job here.
Yes.
Okay. Now, I know in terms of teachers in general, it's getting harder and harder to find people who want to teach. Now, you were, as I said, a teacher for 13 years at the Tele School, was High School for Telecommunications and
Arts and Technology.
Arts and Technology. Tell me a little bit about how that shapes who you are today as the Deputy Chancellor, a person who was a teacher, you were an AP, you were a principal.
Yeah. I've had the most fortunate career I can imagine. I worked for about 15 years in the classroom and about 15 years as a school leader. What I saw was we have wonderful, wonderful people who want to work in our schools, both in the school I spent the bulk of my career in, but in the schools I'm visiting 2 or 3 times a week now. And what I see is that the job is a very difficult job, but the people who enter education enter the profession because they want to take on hard work. I think that part of what we need to recognize as a community is that we don't want to make their job harder by calling them names. And I know it sounds childish, but that's a big deal. People want to feel that their work is valued. My experience is that there are thousands and tens of thousands of great teachers in this city, and we don't say that often enough.
So you want them to be recognized. I think it's quite true with the kind of heat that teachers take. It's really no wonder to me that people don't want to go into teaching. I mean, I can say that. I mean, who would want to? Yes, you don't get any acknowledgement for a very, very hard job. Do you think the job is tougher than when you were a teacher? I mean, it wasn't that long ago, but do you think it's changed?
It was 15 years ago
was
since I was a
just tough.
classroom teacher. But I think the public perception of the job has made it more difficult. I think that as we get smarter and smarter at looking at student work, we call out that we need to do a better job. And I do think we hold teachers to a higher standard than we did when I started teaching in 1984.
Now, you know, college readiness is a big issue, and from the CUNY perspective, we take so many of the New York City high school students. What do you say about college readiness, and are students college ready, and what is the DOE doing to ensure that they are?
I think college readiness ultimately boils down to the things I started this conversation with. Students need to be able to think for themselves. Students who enter CUNY or enter any post-secondary institution able to define ideas, able to do their own research, able to create the building blocks of a good argument will be successful in college. We need to make sure that we're providing our students with the skills necessary to be independent thinkers. They don't lack the intellectual ability to be good college students, but if we train them only to pass multiple choice tests, they will fail in college.
So they don't come to us, we feel, as able to do the kind of writing that's required in college. Now, when you were at the Tele School, you did a lot, their graduation rates went up. Can you just tell us quickly what you think were some of the factors in improving graduation rates and what we could extrapolate from that?
I think that I know that we looked at our work in terms of getting students through high school as never about getting students through high school. We looked at our work as making sure our young people would be prepared to be successful wherever they went after our building. And we began that in the 9th grade. We know that throughout this city, a college degree is probably an essential credential for most of our population. We wanted to make sure our students all knew that they would be prepared to do that, and we wanted to start that in the 9th grade. We saw our full faculty was focused on making sure students were pushed to do as much as they possibly could. One of the things we said was, you will always take the hardest class you are able to pass. And so as a principal, I would have many an argument with a parent about whether their son or daughter needed to be in calculus. No, they didn't need it to graduate from a New York City public high school, but yes, they needed it to be a part of our school because it would be good for them.
So you set very high expectations for one thing, and you're saying your students rose to that expectation.
But I'm also saying we had to know who our students were. We took in a wide range of students at telecommunications. I would have been selling people a bill of goods if I said that everyone would get to every single top level class. It wasn't true. We wanted to make sure we worked with the strengths of our students and we supported our students where they needed more support.
We're so running out of time, and I have so many more things to ask you. I'm going to say quickly. The STEM and the science and the technology fields. I read a recent report that minority students are very attracted to these fields, and yet they do not have the access to the information and the ability to get jobs or to prepare for those fields. What do you say about that?
I think that those things are things we are going to work on very strongly right now. We are building out a computer science curriculum. We've opened up a couple of computer science schools, and our summer schools this year are going to be focused on STEM work.
And in terms of technology, where's the DOE? Where are we in terms of technology and preparing students?
We are establishing a vision for EdTech throughout our school system. We see technology, we see this as a new learning space for our young people. They come in well equipped to speak in a different, text is a different thing for people who are 14 right now. We are going to take advantage of that and help students be able to learn and think with technology because it's going to be an essential part of their lives.
With less than a minute to go, I have to ask you, Deputy Chancellor Weinberg, what would you like your personal legacy to be as the person who's in charge of teaching and learning in our system today?
I would want us to see ourselves as a learning organization, that we are all learning. We figure out what we need to know, we experiment with how we can get better, we self-assess honestly, and then we try again tomorrow. And I think if we can incorporate that into the minds and hearts of our teachers and our students, we will be a great school system, and I think we're well on our way.
Thank you so much for joining us today on EdCast. Please don't go away. We'll be right back with our Ed Bites. Welcome back to this edition of Ed Bites.
The reading achievement gap between white and Asian children and disadvantaged minorities has been widely recognized. Now there is evidence of a further gap when it comes to evaluating information on the web. According to a recent study, many students are unable to conduct online research and distinguish the quality of information. This inability is more frequently seen among disadvantaged students than their wealthier peers. It was noted, however, that all students had difficulties communicating the results of their online assignments.
If you ever felt your teacher had a favorite in class, you may have been right. Research from Germany indicates that the teacher's pet probably had a personality that matched the teacher's. In the study, teachers thought more favorably about students' academic abilities if their personalities were similar to the teacher's. This bias of higher expectations and even better grades for students could hurt other students who don't look or act like the teacher. The study's authors recommend that teachers receive training to help them recognize their biases.
Inside Higher Ed reports on more bad news for millennials. In international comparison, America's young adults ages 16 to 34 lagged behind most nations in the areas of literacy, numeracy, and problem solving, often ranking last. Countries that ranked high for millennial scores were Finland, Japan, Sweden, Netherlands, and Norway. The U.S. millennial population included both those with and without a college education. The data show that a college degree is not a guarantee of comparing well internationally. U.S. millennials with 4-year bachelor's degrees scored higher in numeracy than their counterparts in only 2 countries, Poland and Spain.
Confirming the suspicions of parents and educators, a new study reveals that children today are reading less. The Kids and Family Reading Report, based on a 2014 survey of more than 2,500 parents and children, found that the number of kids ages 6 through 17 who frequently read books for fun is lower than it was 4 years ago. While more than half of kids ages 6 to 8 are frequent readers, that figure falls to just 14% for kids ages 15 to 17. Spending time looking at a screen seems to be the major factor for the decline, with kids engaged with online games, apps, and smartphones. Not surprisingly, the kids who read the most had parents who were frequent readers.
So I guess we not only should not use Wikipedia as an academic source, we should not use TMZ either.
Wikipedia is gaining more respectability.
It's a good place to start.
It's a good place
It's
to
a good
start,
place to
yes.
start and then find your
And there are differences
things.
between reading on screen and not,
Right.
but that's a whole other topic of conversation.
Well, that does it for this edition of EdCast.
Until next time, class dismissed.